Welcome to the final session of Food on Demand's Building Your Off-Premises Tech Stack event. We're very grateful to all of you who are joining us for this session, Delivery, DIY, or Outsourcing, where we'll dive into the pros, cons, costs, and benefits of going with a fully outsourced off-premises program, an entirely in-house delivery operation, or any of the many combinations that lie in between those two extremes. I'm joined today by three fantastic experts for this panel. First, we have Liz Bosone, who is Senior Director of Enterprise Accounts at Grubhub, a returning FOD Panelist All-Star. Liz, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
And next, we have Randy Murphy. He is founder and CEO of Order Before, which is a technology brand that's helping restaurants integrate ghost kitchen and virtual restaurant operations and is part of 4Burner Technologies. And very crucially, Randy has a background as a multi-concept restaurant operator himself, which shines through very loudly and clearly in what he's doing now. So thank you as well for joining us, Randy.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it.
And finally, we have Leah Willis, who is the Digital Systems and Technology Manager at Flower Bakery and Cafe. And Flower is a 9-location independent chain in the Boston metro area. And the company created Leah's position in January of 2020, which I think we can all agree is a pretty intense timeline for your new job. So we're especially grateful to have you with us, Leah.
I'm happy to be here.
So we are very clearly far past the time when restaurants had just a few big decisions to make about delivery, whether or not to deliver at all, and if so, to work with one delivery provider or to try several or to try every single option that's available in your market. So these days, the conversation is more about optimizing both the economics and the operations of your delivery program for your particular business. And at this point, the options fall along a spectrum ranging from going it entirely on your own with your own delivery drivers, relying entirely on third-party delivery drivers or providers to both generate and deliver orders, or something somewhere in the middle, which could mean bringing your own digital orders in through your brand's own website or app, and then kicking out the actual deliveries to a third-party provider like, say, Grubhub or DoorDash, and only paying for the actual delivery in that setup, not for demand generation. So it's gotten a lot more complex in recent months. So these are just the primary choices as we're seeing these increasing options that are designed to fit restaurants of all kinds, from small mom and pops up to the big enterprise or franchise brands. So we're all here today to help provide some clarity and best practices from experts who definitely know the pros, cons, challenges, and opportunities here. So Liz, let's get things rolling with you. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do for restaurants on the Grubhub platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for having me, Tom. So I specifically work on the enterprise portion of our business. So I lead our enterprise accounts team, and we are really focused on partnership management anywhere from our mid-market brands, which is maybe 25 to a couple hundred units, up through, our largest enterprise partners, which is thousands and thousands of units with many franchisees. When I first started at Grubhub about 4.5 years ago, I had one person on my team, and now we have like 55 on my team alone, which has been really exciting growth. So looking forward to joining the discussion today.
Well, thank you. And Randy, same question to you. Tell us a little bit about your restaurant background and what you're now doing with Order Before.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. Yeah, so before I got into the restaurants about 15 years ago, I was actually in high tech in software and applications for about 15 years, and inexplicably got into the restaurant business. That was a bad call. That's a lot harder. Had two multi-unit, multi-brand 35 locations across 2 brands in 9 markets and 3 states and 2 countries. And we did a lot of off-premise, so a lot of delivery, a lot of takeout. And across the last 15 years, we also did our own delivery. So we became delivery experts. We did our own delivery. We did third-party delivery, and really decided to launch Order Before. And I'm the founder and CEO of that company to really give another option to operators instead of just outsourcing all delivery, being able to bring it in through your own marketing website, and then really give options to really allow the existence of all three types of delivery coming from one location or multiple locations, not just one type of revenue coming through.
Well, it's especially great that you have all of that in your background for what you're doing now. But Leah, last but definitely not least, why don't you tell us about yourself and also about Flower Bakery and Cafe, which I absolutely cannot wait to visit when I'm able to get out to Boston.
Yeah, so I started at Flower about 7 years ago. When I started, we had 4 locations and no digital ordering at all. And so it's a very, very different beast now, not quite the hundreds of locations that Liz was talking about, but definitely we've grown and had to experience a lot of shifts in that. And so that's where my role comes in is trying to develop the current partners that we have and also anticipate the next steps of what's coming next.
Well, thank you, Leah, and we'll get into more of that a little further on. So let's get into the heart of all of this. I want to start with a question that's both for Liz and for Randy. So, we've had several audience members ask about this in advance. At a basic level, how should restaurants decide how much of their delivery operation to outsource versus doing it themselves? And of course, we're talking about both demand generation and delivery fulfillment here. Because there's now this full spectrum of choices, what are the main factors restaurants should consider, and how do those costs shift from one setup to another? Liz, let's start on that with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think there's really 3 fundamental questions that restaurants should answer initially. So, the first is, do I want to play in the delivery space? And obviously, it sounds like in your example, they've decided the answer to that is yes. So they have decided that's a good fit for their business. I think then the next consideration is really which channels do I want to offer that delivery service? Meaning, do I want to stick to my own website or app, or do I also want to branch out and include those third-party delivery providers? And I think then finally, the last question is really then, who should facilitate the actual delivery of the food? So do I want to employ drivers, or do I want to actually just outsource that last leg of the process, either to the third-party provider, or there's also, I think, just some logistics last mile operators out there as well that maybe don't offer the marketplace side. So there's a number of options and opportunities with different costs. I think, in terms of channels, the third-party provider options like a Grubhub or DoorDash really help restaurants amplify the digital presence. I think we pride ourselves on really being a demand lead gen for orders, capturing that net new audience, driving those incremental sales, whether the restaurant decides to deliver the orders themselves or have our drivers do it for you. We feature both options. Actually, Grubhub's initial business model was really born on the self-delivery model. We just started adding in our delivery services about 5 to 6 years ago. And I think really depending on which option the restaurant decides to go with, there's really a number of benefits for each, right? So for self-delivery, of course, there are lower commission rates on the third-party provider if the restaurant is delivering their own food. They also get to own that diner experience from start to finish, which is incredibly important, especially, maybe on the catering side. There's also the opportunity to streamline communication with drivers and diners. But then if you were to opt for the third-party delivery provider, there's also that increased research, expanded delivery boundaries as to what maybe the restaurant themselves could facilitate. You're capturing new day parts, generating those incremental orders. We would manage the care process for you, which is pretty amazing. And then also marketing and technology tools that would be at your disposal as well through the third party. And then if you do want to focus on costs, I think the self-delivery specifically, there's additional expenses, driver salaries, insurance, parking, et cetera, managing the delivery logistics on your own, and then coordinating that setup and training. And if you were to then opt for the third party, we're taking, most of that into consideration. The only thing that the restaurant would need to really do is to pay that delivery commission to actually have a driver deliver the food on behalf of the restaurant and the third party.
Well, thank you, Liz. That's a really good starting point. And Randy, I'll throw the same question in your direction. Obviously you're coming at this from a different perspective. So from where you're at, what are the main factors a restaurant should consider when they're looking at this full spectrum of options, from DIY to full outsourcing?
Sure. Yeah, Tom. So, a lot of it has to do with the maturity of the brand and the operation. And why I say that is, to decide, kind of which route you want to go. If you have volume for deliveries, it makes sense to do more DIY and or last mile. But if you're new to the space, companies like Grubhub and the other DSPs are phenomenal for that lead generation and kind of see if you want to do delivery. That way you're not having to invest as much into it. Most of the customers we have, they've decided they want to be in the delivery space. They have volume. Most of our customers, as you know, are ghost kitchens. So almost everything they do is delivery. So really that decision has already been made. And then it's more of a, traffic, right? Traffic on their website. If they have existing traffic on their branded URLs, even better. So they can take advantage of that traffic already coming there, and they might not necessarily have to pay for that front end lead generation. What we see is it's actually best to have a really good mix. So allowing in DSP, allowing in DIY or performing DIY, and then also doing, last mile fleet based on labor. So that's the third part. So number one, it's the maturity of their brand. Do they want to do it themselves or not? The second is how much traffic do they have coming to their branded URL? Do they need help with that? And then the third is the availability of drivers. Liz made a point there, without a doubt. I mean, you got to have labor to do the DIY part, and it can be costly, especially if you don't have good volume. If you have good volume, then a lot of things come available to you, not only in getting the customer data right with DIY and last mile, but also really getting the economics right, and thus focusing on locations that have multiple brands inside them, whether it be a traditional ghost kitchen or just a four-wall traditional restaurant that's doing virtual brands. That's where an individual operator can increase that volume and take advantage of their own delivery service, and that's the product that we provide to support that.
I like that we're far enough into the future to already be saying traditional ghost kitchen. I mean, we're like one step away from saying, just an old school ghost kitchen. But Liz, I want to go back to you. Without rehashing everything we've gone through over these last 13 months, I know that a lot of restaurants at this point are taking a fresh look at their delivery operation with the idea that hopefully we're about to be coming out of this pandemic, at least at some point. So what tend to be the highest priorities of the folks that you work with, the enterprise clients, whether that's reducing the burden of commissions, optimizing staffing levels, or just still looking to take out tedious manual labor out of the operation in terms of efficiency? What are the actual priorities you're hearing from clients at this point?
Yeah, I think what we're hearing is, analyzing the strategies that have been implemented in response to the pandemic, and, which ones are worth continuing, or which ones need to be readjusted, or which ones just don't make sense maybe in the near future. And so, for those that maybe they want to continue with, how can they enhance those strategies? So, I think we've seen a lot of our larger partners and even some smaller ones establish new roles specifically dedicated to supporting off-premise. with third party staffing, back of house technologies, et cetera. We've even seen many restaurants go so far to like restructure their restaurants to better suit off-premise operations. And I think it's worth taking a look at that. And is that just really how things should operate from here on out, or do maybe some things transition back to how they were? I think with delivery really here to stay, as far as we see it, our partners have really turned to us to optimize the digital off-premise strategies even further. We have our enterprise partners specifically looking to us for marketing, perks campaigns, diner loyalty, virtual restaurants, really a lot of options. And then catering, of course, catering was a pretty big portion of our business, and obviously a huge portion of so many restaurants' business. And we are seeing restaurants, those orders starting to pick back up now that offices are starting to reopen or planning to reopen. Restaurants are definitely interested in revisiting those strategies and accommodating the new normal. Is that maybe group orders as opposed to large catering orders? I think there'll be some trends there as well. And we actually have it. It's interesting, now that, again, most folks are working still remotely at this stage, like we're actually working with some specific corporate partners on offering like our subscription program to their employees to order at home. So it's really interesting to see, will these things be permanent, or are things going to kind of go back to what was the norm at some stage soon?
The catering market is going to be especially interesting in these next 6 to 9 months, whatever that's going to be. But Liz, I want to stick with you because the most frequent audience question we had in advance of this session is, what should restaurants expect to save if they're either doing their own deliveries or their own demand generation? And of course, we all know that it's a case-by-case situation. It's not easy to generalize, but can you give it a shot?
Absolutely. And part of it I already covered, right? So obviously there's saving on the delivery specific commission if the restaurant is actually delivering the food themselves. I would believe orders generated from their own channel are technically zero commission orders. However, it's definitely possible they're missing out on that exposure and incrementality that third-party providers can bring. So I think that's something to obviously weigh. We believe really for many restaurants, a blend of the two can really make sense in reaching the off-premise goals. So obviously taking advantage of those very dedicated diners at that zero commission option, but then hopefully pulling in new diners with these other streams that then would have a commission component.
That makes sense. I've heard anything from like 90-10, 10% being native down to 60-40, somewhere in that range. That's pretty common in interviews that I've been doing. And Randy, I want to move to you, and Leah, we'll get to you in just a minute. You have your pulse on the future of this market, specifically on the ghost kitchen and virtual restaurant side. So, I'm just wondering, in your estimation, are virtual restaurants going to be a big part of the future of this industry, or a huge one? I mean, it's kind of a bit of a dramatic question, but I'm curious what you'd say to that.
I think it's the latter. I think it's going to be a huge impact. As an operator an owner operator for 15 years. I mean, the biggest thing in our industry is startup costs, startup risk, liability. Trying a new brand, does it work? Does it not work? The beauty of a virtual brand in a ghost kitchen environment is it doesn't take that away, but it significantly reduces it, right? And so your upfront cost goes down, your long-term liability should something go wrong goes away. And especially trying new things, innovation, I think is going to happen even more. And so there's this opportunity for virtual brands to proliferate. Either, we see it in kind of 3 different ways, right? We see the ghost kitchen, or like I said, the traditional ghost kitchen model. Someone owns a facility, a lot of operators inside of it. And then the second could be a virtual brand company, right? All they're doing is creating brands and almost like a franchisor selling them out to other places. And then there's the third is, hey, I'm just a traditional restaurant operator. I need to increase my revenue. And as an operator, that is really tough to do on your existing brand. If you're up 5%, it's a wonderful year. Obviously, no one's looking at that right now with COVID. So how do you dramatically increase your four-wall economics? Well, bring in another brand. You know, if you do pizza, bring in something that's complementary. And then thankfully, because of the last 10 years with technology, GPS, you know, originally, obviously, the kind of the Uber rideshare model, and then of course, Grubhub and other technologies, it makes the virtual brand experience, makes it work because the consumers kind of know that whole thing. And so I think it's here to stay. Then the question simply becomes the economics. You had asked about the difference of economics of DIY and DSPs. And from our standpoint with our software, it's about 12 to 17% additional margin on each revenue dollar. And our customers get the data on all that traffic as well. So they don't get the demand generation, but now they have 12 to 17% more of every revenue dollar to put towards brand and revenue generation. And so they're investing in their own company, their own brand, their own facility, and in a nice mix versus solely relying on the DSPs, which is shockingly what we see almost with every customer we have, every prospect we talk to. 100% of their revenue is coming from the DSPs, and over time, that's not a safe way to do business.
Yeah, it's increasingly rare for me to hear somebody that their business is on one end or the other end of that spectrum. I actually can't think of the last time I've heard that from a restaurant operator. And this is the perfect time to switch gears and bring you in, Leah. Thank you for patiently waiting. So, you know, as we said earlier, you started in this newly created delivery and technology facing role at Flower just before the pandemic hit. So in terms of the delivery and technology side of your business, how is the company different now than, you know, now that we're more than a year into this pandemic? I mean, can you take us through some of the biggest changes?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, we went from probably 10 to 15% of our total orders being digital, whether that was delivery or through our app or our online ordering system, to at one point 100% of our orders being digital. We weren't taking any in-location orders, limiting any, you know, exposure for our staff that we could. To then when we're slowly opening up, it was probably more like 80%, and now we're settling, depending on our location, at about 50% of our orders being digital, which is, you know, was a goal of ours before the pandemic, and didn't like how we got there, but it definitely, you know, looking on the bright side of things, it sped up that process. And it definitely brought some growing pains, a lot of learning on the job kind of things, but we definitely are very different now than we were 13 months ago.
Well, I want to double down on that because after working exclusively with Caviar, Flower now only works with Grubhub and its LevelUp subsidiary under their delivery as a service model. So that is a little uncommon, at least from my recent experience. And so I'm wondering, why have you decided to work with an exclusive delivery partner rather than, you know, for example, using all of the big third-party providers in your city? You know, I'm kind of wondering, what's the logic there?
Sure. I mean, for us, a huge part of that decision was the experience for our staff in the bakeries. If you're juggling 3-4 different ways orders are coming in, that is a huge burden on our front of house managers. And if you think about it, it's really hard to keep consistency in our hospitality and our quality of those orders. If managers are running around to different places, getting orders manually and putting them in some ways, some other ways, you know, it's integrated. That for us was a big lift. Part of that has to do with our menu. We have a very large menu that changes depending on the time of day. And having to say update 4 different menus is all the time is way too much work for potentially not any benefit. So and it's definitely beneficial for us to only work with representatives from Grubhub and really push that relationship further and be able to work off of each other and push our brand to be better.
Well, along those lines, and really getting into the heart of what this session is about, Flower has its own delivery drivers, but you guys also outsource deliveries to Grubhub. So whether we're talking catering or individual meals, who delivers what, and how does the company make that decision? Or I guess put a different way, why not just deliver everything with your own drivers?
Sure. I feel like Randy touched on this a little bit, but for, consistency, it is a huge labor task to have drivers to be able to deliver one salad throughout the day. It's if the orders aren't consistent, it's really hard to justify that much labor. Versus for catering, which is what we use our in-house drivers for, those are going to be larger ticket orders. And we require some notice for that so we can schedule our drivers. And definitely, again, financially, that makes sense. And so we had not always, but almost always offered that catering option. We are not a catering company, so it's very much, we had 30-minute time slots, and that would get the driver from the location to the delivery location, unload, and be able to then bring the next order to the next catering client. So that, and we also do offer that when catering is a thing again. We do offer that we did on Caviar, and we're planning to on Grubhub. But again, the idea of staffing enough people to deliver those one-off orders just wasn't something that we could handle.
Well, that all makes plenty of sense. So I want to shift gears and touch on what Randy was mentioning earlier with you, Liz. How does the decision of how much to DIY or outsource change if a restaurant is going to get into the ghost kitchen environment, or knows or suspects they'll be bringing in a virtual restaurant into an existing brick and mortar? From what I hear, that introduces some real challenges to a restaurant in terms of technology and reporting and kind of that not so sexy side of the business. So how does making that decision change what you want to do and, how you want to structure the off-premises side of the business?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think you can kind of separate the two. So speaking of virtual restaurants specifically, obviously the appeal there is that you can really get more throughput from all your fixed restaurant assets. So kitchen space, labor, et cetera, growing sales, broadening the appeal to diners. If you staff your own delivery drivers, you are then getting that more sales volume to keep the drivers busy, which pretty similar to what Leah was just mentioning, which is obviously great. And really their job isn't, different. If you're outsourcing, then, the VRs really carry no additional costs beyond that delivery commission on the third party side. I think some complexities to consider on the VR side is multiple inventories of branded packaging, or the need for order transmissions that kind of differentiates which concept the order is for. And I know for us specifically, we have some really fantastic point of sale integrations that we've had to essentially, put some additional tech resourcing into to allow additional concepts, so that continues to be something that we're working with restaurants on to ensure that for those that want to keep tablets out of the restaurants, that we're able to do so for, as many VR concepts as they'd like to add. And then for ghost kitchens specifically, it's really an entirely different ballgame. So gives you that space focused 100% on delivery operations, gives you more leeway to find new ways to expand, your sales opportunities. And unless your core brand is really busy, which is maybe why you sought out an additional kitchen space, you may have additional capacity on adding one or more VRs into this ghost kitchen space, which makes a ton of sense. The complexities that I mentioned during the VR portion, they still exist, but in that ghost kitchen, you don't have to worry about the other complexities of being a restaurant, right? So diners in store, maybe diners going through a drive-through, et cetera. You can really focus on just the four walls of that kitchen.
Well, Randy, in one of our recent phone calls, you mentioned how you guys are actually working directly with ghost kitchen facilities themselves and trying to get them on your platform, which adds a whole other degree of complexity to all of this. So, I say that just to keep that in mind. But, a similar question that I posed to Liz, if operators are suspecting they'll be integrating a virtual brand or going into a ghost kitchen environment, I'm wondering how much of their tech stack needs to change to allow that to happen, or should they fundamentally change how much they're outsourcing or DIYing in terms of their off-premises program? I mean, does that additional volume trigger any sort of changes or at least milestones where you might want to reevaluate?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, from the third party side, we are able to kind of customize which option the restaurant, individual restaurant or enterprise brand would like to outsource. So, for example, if you have 3 different VRs you're running, and yes, it is too much to do self-delivery for all of them, we could select 1, 2, or 3 of those to provide the delivery service. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing option. So I think there's those opportunities for sure. And then yes, on the tech side, it really depends on which integration path the restaurant and third-party provider have decided to kind of foray into together. So, there's some where it's a quick, flip of a switch to essentially get those VR concepts added and flowing through the point of sale. For others, it does require that dev work that, could take some additional time depending on the complexities.
Well, thank you, Liz. And Randy, I want to ask that same question to you, my good man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. and Liz really set it up well. They're in the 2 different models. Let's talk VR first with virtual brands and concepts. Is the complexity is always around 2 things: the data or tech stack, right? The point of sale that exists based on the traditional restaurant's storefront sign in their brand, right? What are they currently running in their restaurant? The second is around execution. And so we're talking to a lot of virtual brand owners and operators, and they're getting wrapped around the axle on how do I get all this into the point of sale and then get it out and manage all this. And so a while back, we just said, hey, look, and to answer your question, they don't really need to change their tech stack. In a virtual brand environment, we go in and provide a secondary tool that they can use to manage those virtual brand inventories, manage the execution, so just-in-time training and expediting, making sure the right food goes in the right packaging. Imagine if you're running 6 dark kitchens out of the back of a 3,000 square foot location that's going into 3 different types of delivery. You have to have software that manage that. And it doesn't have to go into point of sale. In fact, we prefer it not to go into point of sale because it slows you down and it adds another layer of integration. And the point of sale really isn't giving you anything that you can't already get through, in this case, our software package. And so from a VR standpoint, we're basically saying, hey, look, don't try to integrate with the point of sale. Integrate at a back office level. Do daily or weekly data integration that you might need for your back office program, your financial package, your payroll. But then use our software to manage those other virtual brands. That way you don't shake the anthill with the point of sale, but yet you still can execute as many brands as you want. Conversely, In the ghost kitchen space, it's very different, and they don't really need the point of sale experience. So a lot of times you don't even see a point of sale in some of these ghost kitchen operators' kitchens. Mm-hmm. But what they do need is internal logistics in a ghost kitchen facility, whether it's one building with 100 member kitchens or it's 4 buildings on a campus that have 300 units. Our software allows a consumer to order from multiple kitchens on that particular property. So think about what has to happen. That order has to break apart virtually, go to each one of these kitchens. They have to know when to make it and how to have it ready for a runner to then take it to a central distribution point for either delivery or curbside takeout. Well, that doesn't exist out there. And so that's what we built for ghost kitchens. So they need most of the technology on the ordering and the delivery, but they need a different middle piece. They need the ability to be informed about what they need to make so they can get it to a central distribution point. Once again, don't touch the point of sale. And in both cases, whether it's virtual brand or ghost kitchen, we recognize what Leah was saying there too, is operators don't want 4, 5, 6, 7 tablets. The reality is people aren't doing what Leah's brand is doing. Most of them are doing 6, 7, 8. They're doing every channel they can get. Mm-hmm. So what we do provide is, since we are the end-to-end solution that doesn't have to be integrated at the point of sale to operate your virtual brand situation in your ghost kitchen, of course, we're integrating all DSP orders into one virtual interface so it can be managed by the kitchen, whether it's in the back of a traditional restaurant or in a ghost kitchen facility.
Well, thank you, Randy. I appreciate that for all the operators that we know are looking at both ghost kitchens and VRs. And I also really like the term just-in-time training. That sounds a little bit like journalism, and I am going to remember that term. But Leah, getting back to you and getting back to a more traditional restaurant environment here, in referencing LevelUp, you said that their integration into Flowers' Toast POS system was a really big deal for you personally and your job. And you got a little fired up talking to me about how that made your life easier. Can you tell us what that was like and how big of a labor savings actually came from integrating for those who maybe haven't directly integrated delivery into their systems?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, with 9 locations, we had 9 at that time caviar menus that all had to be individually updated and adjusted, and we changed our menus a lot, as well as then 9 at that point different toast menus. And with LevelUp's integration into Toast and a few changes that we made with Toast, we were able to, once switching to Grubhub, make all of those menus one menu. And so for me, updating those menus was part of my job, still is, but that was probably at least 8 hours a week of my job. And now that was like gone. 30 minutes maybe, I can just do it once. And that also cut down on human error, right? On my end, on the location ends, each location needed to update 2 to 3 menus when they sold out of something. So like I said before, our menu is fairly large, especially with like morning pastries. Once we sell out, we sell out. But to manage that expectation of the guests and hospitality is a huge part of Flowers' business model. If we had items available online, people get excited. I personally get emotionally attached to my food. I want what I've ordered. And then getting that call that says, oh, just kidding, we don't have it, was something that we really wanted to cut down on. That's, again, I would be very upset. Mm-hmm. And so that part of it, once we integrated, we used LevelUp's integration to allow for Grubhub to be integrated. And also, it cost-wise, we were previously using a third party to enter the delivery orders into Toast for us. So that took that cost away as well. And it just honestly, our front of house managers' quality of life went up. They were very, very happy. So, and we had been really happy with LevelUp. LevelUp has developed our app. They have incredible loyalty, incredible loyalty model. And so using that partnership, we we definitely benefited from that switch.
Well, this is kind of a random general question for you, Leah, but as a follow-up to that, are there still parts of your job or still parts of the flower off-premises delivery or off-premises operation that are still that tedious or still that time-consuming? I mean, are there things that are still on your to-do list that you're just like, I absolutely cannot wait to get rid of this?
I mean, I'm sure that there are. My mind is going blank right now, but everybody has those parts of their job, right? Like, of course, the ideal is that you just read my mind and it gets done and I don't actually have to manually do anything, but I think we're a few years away from that technology. But yeah, I mean, we have constantly improved basically efficiency. That's what we want to do, get more efficient, be able to free up more brain space to get better, both financially and, for our guests.
Well, that makes sense. And I bet Seth at LevelUp is probably working on that sort of mind reading. That might be what those fancy glasses are all about that he wears. So yeah. I could see that. But Liz, that's a good segue to move to you. We touched on this earlier, but do you get the impression that a lot of restaurants did implement some hasty stopgap or survival delivery systems to make it through the pandemic, but now have some work to do at refining or improving those systems at this point? I mean, you focus on the enterprise restaurants, inherently larger restaurants. So I'm wondering if that does or does not apply to that end of the spectrum.
Yeah, I think it really applies to all. I mean, when dining rooms closed, we onboarded thousands of restaurants, SMB all the way through enterprise onto the platform within just a few weeks. For many, it was, let's get set up on delivery ASAP. Either they were kind of, deciding if that was something they wanted to do or just hadn't gotten around to it. And basically it was like, can we get all these live within, 48 hours? I do think restaurants will want to take a look back, determine what specific strategies were more work for like survival versus what is long-term. We've seen some really awesome ideas come out of this pandemic. So curbside pickup, that is something being utilized. Cocktail kits has been a really fun option for folks, I think, at home. Meal kits, family ordering, etc. Like these types of concepts, I really think have staying power. And it's been something new and interesting for diners. I think something else for folks to consider moving forward is that like loyalty rewards programs. There are so many new diners now circulating throughout the delivery ecosystem. So how do we turn them into loyal fans of our specific restaurant brand or, for individual locations, our individual concept. And then we touched on virtual restaurants, obviously. So I do think some of our partners developed VRs. And some of them, did it just as an extension of their current offering. So whether it was like meal kits of their specific cuisine that they already sell, or possibly they were focusing on a day part that wasn't their strength previously and making a more casual option of their food. They obviously have that chance now to reevaluate. So is that something that's worth continuing moving forward? And, for others, the VR exceeding their expectations, they'll definitely continue it. For others, perhaps it's something that, they'll reassess and decide to stop once in-store dining is back to 100%.
Well, thank you, Liz. And I really hope that meal kits and that sort of experience doesn't go away, because I think that's such a cool hybrid between dining in and just getting delivery. I love that middle space. I think it's truly something unique that, deserves to survive past all of this. But
Absolutely.
Randy, I want to go back to something, Randy, that you said earlier, touching on the idea that possibly POS could become a relic. I know you realize that that's something I've latched onto, because I think, I've spent plenty of time punching into POS screens in previous careers in my life and know how important that is for restaurants. and also what a massive part of the operation and what a massive expense that is, both in terms of dollars and in training. And so, what needs to happen in the restaurant tech space or just inside the four walls of a restaurant to actually make that vision a reality for operations that are planning to really get into ghost kitchens and get into VRs in a big way? I mean, is there some way you can start to prepare for that kind of reality without necessarily jumping off the diving board?
Well, the short answer to the question, Tom, is just really no. There's no way to prepare for it. And the situation we're in is the traditional point of sale platform is very robust. But to get changes on some of these systems, it takes months, years, if ever. And technology is just changing too quick. There are some leading tech point of sale providers out there that still don't even really allow their users to perform delivery. I mean, that delivery's been around for 60 years. How do you not have a robust delivery component? And then, of course, integration. And they're not that big on integration, and you have to go to another provider to get integration. And then it creates a whole different set of costs and challenges. And so so we just kind of took a different approach. Then there's the hardware. Oh, you got to buy my proprietary hardware. Oh, and then you got to go through my particular merchant services. So there's a lot of issues with the hybrid of point of sales out there, and I'll answer it from two situations. From a ghost kitchen scenario, there's just not a need for a point of sale, a traditional point of sale, right? You need something that can manage the ghost kitchen facility as a whole, as well as something that the member kitchens inside the ghost kitchen facility can do their job as well every day. And they need to be able to deliver, they need to be able to execute the food, they have to have visibility of everything going on in the ghost kitchen facility, and they got to be able to deliver it however they can, and they got to be able to label, sticker everything that goes out. Don't need a point of sale in that scenario, but you need all the reporting and obviously all the things that you would get in a traditional point of sale. That's why ours is a ghost kitchen point of sale. From a virtual brand situation, like I said, it's don't try to crack into that point of sale. Don't just leave it alone. Provide different technology that doesn't have the total cost of ownership that a point of sale has, which can be upwards of $20,000 or $30,000 for 5 years. It doesn't have proprietary hardware. It's a SaaS-based program. So if restaurants want to get into the VR world, they can do it without any investment whatsoever from the technology to help run that thing. So I think point of sales, if they don't change or provide this, they are going to fall on the wayside for restaurants that want to migrate to this world, because you just can't do it with your point of sale without tremendous pain and cost and ongoing suffering. We tried for a long time. So yeah, things are changing. Not everyone will go to this model, but I mean, I would think most operators, at least half of them, whether they're small mom and pop trying to build their brand, someone trying to get into the space, or even the large operators that are just trying to backfill a particular area using a ghost kitchen or virtual brand model.
Well, I really think that the software as a service model could be a good thing maybe 5-10 years into the future in this industry, making the technology side a little bit less sticky, where if your provider hasn't caught up with what's happening in the marketplace, make it a little easier to pick up your tent stakes and move on to something else. Maybe that's a little oversimplified, but I think that would be good for restaurants that feel a little bit tied down to previous investments. But with seeing where we're at with the clock here, Leah, I want to throw my very last question your way. You guys have done at Flower, you've done a really good job of reacting to everything that this pandemic has thrown your way. Obviously it hasn't been easy, but I'm wondering what advice you would give a smaller restaurant company, of course, different geography, not directly competing with you, somebody who isn't nearly as far along with their delivery systems as Flower is. How might they do some work to improve both the efficiency and the profitability of their delivery option, looking at doing it themselves, outsourcing, and all of those options in between? What's some advice you would give to somebody who's just not as far along on that curve?
Yeah, I mean, I think first thing is to kind of remove that panic mindset that we've had from the beginning of the pandemic. Remove that from the equation. Remind themselves that they have time, so they can compare, make decisions based on their financial state. If they are able to figure out a system that is directly integrated, have that really efficient workflow based on their POS, based on whatever they want. You know, if they're able to do that, absolutely go for it. If they are, you know, have a very consistent delivery orders and have a very consistent delivery radius, maybe it is something to look into to do it themselves. I think comparing the financial and reality of all of the options is really what especially a smaller restaurant would need to do. I mean, there's a lot of, not hidden because it's not sneaky, but there are a lot more costs than people think to having delivery services. However, there's a lot more costs than people think to doing it themselves. So just taking the time to make an educated decision and what's right for their business is I think the biggest, my biggest advice, and not just panicking to make a choice, because that's when you get systems that are like just too much to handle and you scrap the entire thing.
Well, Leah, I think that's good advice. Panic is my personal comfort zone, but one thing that I would add to that list is reaching out and talking to people, whether it's, you know, your reps from your delivery provider, your technology providers, even your, you know, whether it's your distributor or even restaurants down the block or on the other side of town. I mean, talking to as many people as possible, I think is always a good place to begin as well. But I want to thank all of you, Randy, Leah, and Liz. Thank you all so much for sharing your expertise and your time with all of us and all of the readers who are participating on the other end of the call. Thank you very much.
And that's a wrap on Food on Demand Tech Stack. Thank you so much to our sponsors, our panelists, and you for watching along. I sincerely hope you learned a little something about all the technology out in this space. It can be dizzying, and I also hope you learned a little about how to think about these various technologies for your own company. Be sure to check out our next event in June. We'll be exploring the explosive growth of virtual restaurants, ghost kitchens, and all the dark format restaurants out there. Of course, as Jared mentioned, get ready for this year's Food on Demand conference in Las Vegas in person. After a very strange year, I and the rest of the Food on Demand staff are very eager to see you in person as well. Thanks again. Have a great day.